Good evening, good evening.
Hello, good evening, Professor.
Hey, Henry, how you doing?
Not bad, thanks. How are you?
I'm pretty good, pretty good.
Okay.
Hey, Asha, hey, Marzia, hey, Draga. Draga, were you, if you're there, were you able to see my comments in your document, Draga? She might not be there yet.
Hello, Professor.
Hey, Marcel, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Great. Asha says hi in the chat. Quinn's here. Hey, Quinn.
I'm Professor. Hi, Professor.
Hi there. I hope you're all doing good, doing well. We'll get started in just about a minute or two here. I'm going to start to share my screen. All right. I hope you enjoyed the first few stories in the book.
Not at all. I mean,
Not at all?
I mean, the first one was like, it's like very, very general story about an immigrant. Nothing special. Nothing special. Just there is just one D for the young man who on the river. It just, I don't know why she put it just to make that story more visible, or why, I don't know, but it was a very, very general story. And the third one about Indian writer, it is
Yes.
also very, very general story about how it is complicated sometimes uh, to get visas to some countries for for people, you
Yeah.
know. And I didn't find any extraordinary in those two stories. But the second story, oh my gosh, I loved it.
It's amazing,
The,
isn't it?
the second story
Yeah.
was really amazing story. I
Yeah.
love that story. Yeah.
I think you're right, Henry. I said it last week, and we're going to talk about this book for the next 3 weeks. You know, we don't, you know, the last half of the class, the last 8 weeks, we read Hyperfocus. We go very slowly through it. This book, I don't think we go fast, but we don't have time to talk about every story because I think you're right. Not all of them are the same quality. But one reason I do love this book is all of these stories are written by non-native English speakers, which I just think it's great for you guys to see examples, right? But I think even when the stories in this book don't have what I'm going to call, what I'm teaching you guys to call theme, there are still useful examples of narrative structure and descriptive writing, like we talked about last week. But I think you're right, Henry. When people read these stories and they go, "Oh, it felt very simple or it was basic," I think my opinion is because those are the stories that don't have deeper meaning, right? And that's when you write your own narrative. That's the hard part, right, for students is to make sure that you get some deep meaning into the narrative. So yeah, I agree. Not all of the stories are of the same quality. And I think A Map is only one story. I think there are about 5 or 6 stories in here that are really fantastic. And A Map of Lost Things is one of the best ones in the whole book, I think.
Yeah, I love that story. I really love that.
And today, when we do our analysis and talk about different examples to understand the structure of narrative writing, hold on. Sorry, everybody. My camera is being crazy. Hold on one second, you guys. That's never happened before. Whoa, hold on. This has never happened before. You guys can still hear me though?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
do.
we do.
Okay, give me a second here. This isn't very interesting, but what is going on? Oh, hey. Sorry about that, everybody. I was you're going to see my hand. Sorry, this is not great video. I'm back. Anyway, I was just sort of, I totally forgot what I was saying. I'm sorry. Just talking about the different quality of the stories in the book. There we go. All right. Sorry about that again. While I was fighting the webcam, I saw Candy come in and Didya's here, and who else? Fauzia Lasana's here. Parisa, hi you guys, just saying hi. Rahimi's here. I was just talking to Henry a little bit about, some of the stories we thought were great, and some of that we thought were okay. And I was basically agreeing, but we'll talk a lot more about a map of lost things today.
Good evening, teacher.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good, teacher.
Excellent. All right, let's get started since we're ready to talk about good narrative stories. Just to make sure, checking my computer stuff, you guys can see my screen here, week 5, February 15th. Thank you. Okay, cool. I'll stop sharing now that I know it works, just to say hello, hi everybody. It is great to see you, hear your voices. Here we are, week 5, Tuesday, February 15th, 2020.
Oh, Professor, and everyone.
Hi, Ina. And Asha says, oh, good, I just see in the chat. So again, saying hi to everybody that's coming in here as well. So good to see you guys. So yeah, just wanted to make my face big, say hello, and then let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, here is what we are doing today. I hope you are all doing well. Here's our agenda. I've got, just as usual, an update about grading and all that stuff at the beginning. And then I did get to grade some of the lesson 7 responses that people had about why translation matters. And I wanted to give some more examples, not just about the structure of your written responses, right? How you should organize your responses, but also sort of the most important information to include in those responses. So I've got some examples, and then we're going to keep talking about narrative structure. Okay, so that is the plan for today. Now, here's my grading update. Remember, no due dates. I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad, but I just want to let you know what's going on. So only 10 students have completed lesson 9. Only 7 students have completed lesson 10, and only 4 have completed lesson 11. So here is what I'm doing. As a result, I'm not going to add any new lessons into Canvas this week. So I'm asking you, please, 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 if everything's okay, if you're safe, your family is safe, and no one is sick, please finish these lessons before next week's Zoom, because next week I'm going to assign the first major writing project, okay? And if you're behind when I assign you that writing project, it's 1,000 words, 1,200 words, you're gonna start to get really behind. So again, you could do it, you could make up, but now's the time to do it, right? We don't have class on Thursday for a reason. It doesn't mean you have 2 extra hours every night, right? Do your homework. Do your homework those nights that the other Thursday class was scheduled. Now, if you have already finished these lessons and you want to go fast, I've got materials that I can give to you, but just send me an email or a text. I can let you know what I encourage you to do as a result, okay? So again, do these lessons and keep reading and keep going, okay? Not to make you feel bad, just to make sure you feel strong and empowered. Questions about this at all before I go into response writing?
Professor?
Yes, Draga.
I'm so sorry, but I think it is not fair not to give us any lessons, because I really would like to do something.
Hey, Draga, I'm just going to interrupt you. Send me a text. We can work it out. It's not about fair. It's not about fair. Okay. And remember, Draga, you tested into transfer level class. So any other questions? But again, like I said, if you feel like Draga and you want more work, email me. I got you. I will take care of you. Parisa, yes. And then I see Candy too, but I saw Parisa's little yellow hand.
Yes. I have a question regarding the lesson 10.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not able to see the lesson 10's direction in module, but I am able to see in quiz. There is no direction, how many lessons or how many page should I read? I don't know. It's my problem.
Oh,
If
no,
you-
it's because it's about a specific story. So you're talking about lesson 10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so as it says here, this is what you should see. I'm sorry if I didn't give instructions, but this is just for this story, a map of lost things. This is for
Just this.
that
Yeah.
story, just that one story. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Sorry if that was unclear, Parisa. Yes, Candy, please. Other questions? Anybody?
Yeah, Professor. I have only one question about the lesson 9.
Yes.
Once writing. I try my best. I see again all the video recording for understand because it's a little bit hard for me.
Sure.
But my question is in the last part of the I'm print the last part when say Borges Pierre Menard who rewrites his own Don Quixote.
Yeah.
So and she in this he I'm not sure if I understand correct, but she say it's better Borges the translation that Borges made the original Don Quixote.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm confused. I don't understand.
Yes, and now remember, now I talked about this only a little bit last week, but first thing, Candy, remember this is an example that she uses. This is an example that Grossman uses to support her main idea. So for your response, you really don't need to worry too much about it, okay, for what you write. So that's number one. But for your reading skills, for your own sort of understanding the material, I can say this is remember we talked about it last week. This is a very long sentence. And there's one sort of key word here where I'm on the screen here where it says, would lead not to a translation. And then it says, but to a grotesque variation on Borges's Pierre Menard. So only at the beginning of this very long sentence does she describe the idea that a translation of Cervantes is better than the original. She says that idea is grotesque and that's bad, right? So she's saying it's not only a long, complicated sentence, right? It's a complicated idea, right? She's saying in this one example, someone made the argument that the translation of Don Quixote was better than the original, and that idea is bad, right? Now, that's a really long, complex idea in a really long, complex sentence, right?
Yeah, because she say is grotesque, and the last sentence say is the best.
I know.
Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah.
But now, Candy, I don't want you to feel, I don't like it when the students feel, oh my God, for too long, but that feeling, like I like when I see you're sort of saying, okay, I didn't understand it, but then we talked about it. Now it kind of makes sense. And again, that's that reading skill, right, Gandhi, that we're practicing. So you're not the only one to find that sentence.
No, but yeah, it's really interesting because I read to Don Quixote. So, oh my God, no.
Mm-hmm. She agrees. She agrees. She agrees. She agrees.
Thank you, Professor.
No, por nada. Absolutely. Anybody else about sort of, I love that Parisa's question was about lesson 10 and making sure she understood what she needed to do before she took the quiz. Candice was asking about lesson 9. Any other questions about my announcement here or any? Yes, please. Lessons
it's
in Canvas.
a question and it's not very relative to the topic, but just like information for you, Professor. So I have some doings in my backyard, and if you have students who need some extra job, please send them to my backyard. That's
Henry's putting a Craigslist ad on in our Zoom meeting. Henry, that's a first for me online. So anyone who wants to work anyone who's a landscape artist, send Henry a message.
Henry, you're smart.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Cool. Yeah, Ina says smart businessman, Henry, or smart recruiting person. So yeah, send Henry a message. Anybody else about this class or about grades before we
Professor.
talk? Yes, please, Rahimi.
Yeah, my question is regarding lesson 11.
Okay.
So I saw you said Arab past. It's a article Arab past. I couldn't find a map. There's only one story. Where can I find the?
It's in the book. It starts on page. Let
15.
me see. Is that it?
15.
No, that's a map of lost things. That starts on page 15. Arab past, American present starts on page 54. It's blocking it out like it always does. Ay, ay, ay. Hold on. I'm sorry, I don't want you to see my room. So there it is. It starts on page 54, Rahimi.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you so much.
You got it. Excellent questions. Maybe that's why we didn't do these lessons yet. We're like, wait, what do we need to do? Anybody else?
Professor, can I come tomorrow to Zoom regarding lesson 7?
Yeah, text me or email. Just text me. It's hard for me to respond to private messages in the chat, Drago, because I'm trying to do like 5 things at one time. But if you text me, we can find a time to do it.
Yeah, I did it.
Thank you. Manisha, please.
Professor, so I don't have any question. I just want to say I really appreciate about the assignments, and I'm so sorry. I am the one who was like, I'm having 2 colleges and a job. Maybe we got so busy. Thank you so much for understanding. And I personally, I will try my best to complete all the assignments.
No problem,
For
Manisha.
sure.
I appreciate you. And remember, I'm not saying it to scare you or make you feel bad. It's just because next week I'm going to assign the essay and I don't want people to fall too far behind.
No, we're not scared, Professor. We know you're helping us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's the goal. Anybody else? Anybody else? Excellent questions. Cool. All right, let's talk about response writing. Okay, now, like I said, I put this little activity together for us before we talk about narrative structure. I want to do one more activity about narrative because when I was grading lesson 7, and I was, you could get 6 points for the response part at the end of lesson 7, where I show you the Grossman quote and I'm like, agree or disagree, right? Respond. And some people got 3 points, some people got 4, some people got 6. I wanted to sort of show you why that is and then look at some examples together, okay? So I wanted to say one more thing about response writing. So as I say here on the slide, in addition to the structure of the response writing that we've studied this semester, I do not want you to forget, please, as I say here, my keys here, my bullet points, right? You must respond to the exact question that your professor asks you. Do not, I repeat, do not respond to a different topic, idea, or question, even if it is connected to the professor's question. In transfer level courses, you may receive a 0 on a response question or an essay, even if your writing is wonderful, if you do not respond to the exact question being asked. Okay? Now, again, you know me, I understand this is the class right before transfer level English. I'm not going to just, punish you and give you 0s, but I want to make sure that I emphasize this and make sure it's really clear. Transfer level classes, you go to psychology, childhood development, communication, history, whatever, any type of response question on a midterm, final exam, essay, you need to answer the specific question that the teacher asks, right? This is a big sort of part of college test taking. And let's look at this example together, okay? So in lesson 7, here's how I wrote the question. So at the end of the introduction, Grossman argues that translation matters because it is crucial to our sense of ourselves as humans. After reading the beginning of her book, do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? Use specific examples. Okay, now key ideas to respond to, right? Here's really what this question is asking you. And again, more examples of sort of thoughtful, careful, specific reading strategies here, right? So there are two really important ideas that I am asking you to respond to. The first one is just translation matters, right? That's number one. Two, it matters because it is very important to help us understand ourselves as human beings. So this question very specifically asks you to respond to the very specific idea that translation and humanity are connected, right? Now, I want to show you some different student examples. Some of these are from our class this semester. Some are from other classes from previous semesters or semesters before this. And I want to look at them and talk about together, what do we think? Like, is it actually answering this specific question? Make sense? Before we look at the examples, any questions about this idea here, about answering the very specific question that you're being asked, and then reading the question carefully to understand the specific ideas that you need to respond to? Does this make sense before we look at the examples? Three, two, one, let's go. Example one.
Professor, one question.
Sure, please.
About my response, I try to relate, not exactly as you explain it now, but I think I put it in other way, because I started to ask, well, say something about language, but I finished about the human beings. So do you think that is not so good, my answer, and specifically?
If you, I don't remember, Didier, if you got 5 or 6 points, I don't remember. But yeah, so if you have a question about your specific answer, text me or come to office hours and I can tell you exactly what to fix, okay?
Okay, perfect, yeah.
Or hopefully, again, my hope is that it will become more clear after we watch, oh my God, after I show you this and then you watching the recording later will watch it. But yeah, specific questions, of course, I'm happy to talk about that one-on-one. Okay, so let's look at the first example. And the other thing I wanted to say, Didier's question is good. Remember, because here I say there's 2 parts that your teachers are going to be looking for when giving points on something like this. Do you have the structure, right? Like we talked about last week. I completely agree with Grossman when she says blah, 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 because blah, 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 right? There's the structure that you got to get right. And then you've got to make sure that you're answering those specific questions as well, okay? So here's some examples. So same exact question that I just showed you, right? So here's one example. I do agree about her idea. Firstly, we need translation for our technology, trade, new information, culture, etc. For example, I have moved to the US 3 years ago and I was not able to talk English. My cause worker translate documents to my language, so I was able to understand the US law. Secondly, translation allows people to travel. For example, I had a trip to India and I got a book regarding their culture because Indian people are so religious people. Finally, I do agree that humans require translation in their daily life. Now, first things first, there's some grammar stuff. Who cares? Everyone in this class is going to make grammar mistakes. I don't even want to talk about the grammar. Who cares? But what I do want to say is, does this student have an idea that they are talking? Like, does this answer make sense?
It's can I say my opinion?
Sure, please.
Yeah. So to answer the question, we need firstly we need to open the idea of humanity, right? And
yes.
what is humanity? And after that, after fully understanding of that idea, we can connect the translation to the humanity and to support the idea of the writer. And I am not sure if we see here the connection between humanity and translation. And I am not sure the writer or the author of this article is even was able to, not was able, but he was thinking about humanity as an idea, how author wants to show us about that.
Okay. Okay. So Henry is focusing on this idea of humanity. Maybe this is an idea that is missing in this student's response. But I'll ask you, Henry, since you started to talk, does this answer, imagine that you don't know this, right? I didn't show you this yet, right? Pretend that you don't know the question that I asked. Does this make sense though? Like, does this author have an idea, present them in a clear way, and make an argument? What do you think, Henry?
Partially, yes.
I think so, right? Again, there's some problems. I think we could absolutely make it better, but I think this is clearly a good student. Maybe took 315 or 50, 50 level writing, because I've got 3 ideas. I've got first, second, finally. I've got clearly an opinion about translation. I think that there's some good ideas in here, and the author that wrote this knows what they want to say. And again, for people who are writing in their second, third, fourth language, that's great, right? That's great. But like Henry is saying, the biggest problem with this one, right, is that it doesn't answer the question that I asked, right?
Can I?
Please, yeah, please.
I'm not sure because being honest, I didn't read that lesson, but I think that he's talking about himself, about their own examples, and maybe not about the examples of the reading.
And that's true, Liz, and that's fine though. Remember, we're allowed to use our personal experience as sort of proof, as evidence in this type of writing, so that's okay. But I do think you're right? The problem here is translation for technology, trade, new information, culture. And then I think, again, the author does a great job of talking about when I moved to the US and I was not able to speak English, this is something about translation in US law. The second one is about translation helps people travel. And the third one is about translation for understanding culture. Now, this idea about culture, we're getting closer to the question I asked, right? We're getting closer to ourselves, our sense of ourselves as humanity. But I think the big problem with this response is it did not answer the question that I asked, because it does not talk about our sense of ourselves as humans. Secondly, what do we notice? So that's about the content, right? That's about what's in the answer. What do we notice about the structure? There's some major problems here at the beginning. What do we notice at the beginning?
The sentence starts with I.
That's fine. That's fine. I totally agree. What's this though? Instead of saying her idea, what?
Yeah. I mean,
Can
you did ask what you mentioned, and I said the sentence starts
can
with
I?
I.
Yeah, Marcel, please, Marcel, tell me what's
Uh,
missing.
It's you said we should mention her or his last name.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, we absolutely need the author's last name. And then what else do we need to do after this? Thank you. Fauzia says missing in the chat. Marzia says this paragraph is talking about why we need translation, not why translation helps us understand our hearts and our souls and our humanity. Marisa, excellent point in the chat, right? If the question was, hey, why do you think humans need translation? Well, then this paragraph would be great, right? But that's not the question that we asked. So remember, just to focus on structure now, I do agree with Grossman's idea. And then what do we need after this? Again, just in terms of the structure, what's missing?
That she claimed.
Yes, thank you. A summary, a paraphrase, right? Something like this.
Citation, huh?
Yeah, I mean, some kind of something. Summary, paraphrase, something. But you need to summarize Grossman's idea, right? That's what's missing here. So there's two problems, with this example. And like I said, I usually don't give a 0. This student didn't get a 0, but this student had a structure problem with the first sentence and had a problem with answering the specific question that I asked. Okay. Again, I just keep thinking about Marisa's example in the chat is fantastic. This would be a wonderful answer with some grammar mistakes, we know. This would be a wonderful answer if the question was, hey, in your opinion, why is translation important in human life? Oh, okay, cool. I've got a good list here. New information, technology, trade. But that's not the question that was being asked here. I've got two more examples, so I do want to go not quickly here, but any other ideas or anything about this first example we looked at together? Cool. So I'm gonna make sure I sort of change. I'll make these red here, just so they stand out when you look at the PowerPoint later. So this is what needs to be added. And then this really, I don't want to be mean, but I would strike through all of this. We can't really use any of this when we do our revision, you know. We got to start over. Yes, Manisha, please.
Quick question, Professor, regarding like the summary and paraphrase Grossman's idea. Is it like necessary every time we should write it in capital? It doesn't matter.
No, yeah, maybe I should just, I keep thinking about, maybe it was Draga, someone else asked about why do I use all these different colors, and no, I'm just trying to make sure it stands out so that it looks like a template. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry if my formatting is scaring people or not, you know, I know you didn't say you're scared, Manisha, but if it's not clear, I apologize.
No, I'm so sorry, Professor.
It's really clear. Thank you,
Okay.
Professor.
No, but
because it's like,
but Manisha's question is still really good. And like I said, another student asked that question. So if two students ask, then just for me to think about how to be more clear. That's all.
Yeah, I thought that it should be like capital. I just wanted to, if it's always should be capital, we have to follow the rules. That's why that was my
just MLA formatting, you know.
Sure.
Candy, I see your hand.
So Professor, so this answer no is correct. These examples that this person write, can I use only for examples? Can I add, or is, for example, my blah, 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 in my travel, in my work, I need,
no, you don't, for this specific question, you cannot, you don't want to talk about travel or work. Unless that's proof of how translation is connected to humanity, our soul, our spirit, our understanding of our humanity. No.
Okay. So only why? Because why matter? Because it's crucial. Yeah, exactly for the.
That's it. It's and again, I'm not saying this is bad writing. I'm saying this doesn't answer the question that I asked. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, I gave this one a 3 out of 6. Let's look at the next one. Hopefully, as we keep going, this will be even more clear. So same thing. So now here's the next one. I agree with Grossman when she argues that translation matters because it is crucial to our sense of ourselves as humans. Already, my teacher brain's like, hey, there's that first sentence, right? We've got that structure. Fantastic. Now, I can tell from my own experience that in a small country like Afghanistan, there are more than 10 spoken and written languages. So without the help of translation, people would not be able to communicate among them. So when it comes to the international community, especially the education section, translation played a significant role. In the third countries, there's not enough textbooks written by their own language. However, a lot of great books are translated from foreign languages. Okay, first of all, let's just make it easy. The first sentence, fantastic, right? I'm checking for structure. I'm checking that template. We got that. We got the author's last name. We got a short summary or repeating what I was asking. Now, how do we feel about this? I think this student, I'll just tell you, this student got a higher score than the first example. But what's good? What's bad? Again, don't even talk about grammar. Leave that for me. Don't even worry about it. But what's good? What's bad here?
We see still the answer, the article more answers why we need translation, but there is no connection between translation and humanity. You know, it is just my own opinion,
Yeah,
and I mean, well, I just say what I see in this article. You know?
totally.
And
And
yeah,
I'll say I agree with Henry. I do think that there is this idea of humanity in here. Like as a teacher, I can see it, but I don't think it's very clear, right? I don't think that this writer clearly and obviously explains. When I see something like international community, I sort of see different communication with 10 different languages. And then I even see like textbooks and great books. I feel like this writer, this student knows what they want to say, but there's no sentence where they very directly say it, right? Imagine that there's like a thesis statement for a short paragraph like this. There's no real direct thesis statement, right? It's kind of indirect. It's kind of indirect. Anything else people notice or see here? There's one big word that's missing. If you remember my template from the last 2 weeks, there's one big word missing right here. I will tell you. The word is, thank you. Yes, Lasana, thank you. Yeah, I think again, this student did a great job using specific examples from their own life, clearly made some connection to this idea about humans meeting each other, understanding each other. There's something in there about humanity, but we're missing that big because word, right? I agree that translation helps understand humanity because, and that could help give us that thesis statement, right? That main sentence, topic sentence, whatever we want to call it for a short writing like this, that very clearly and directly answers the question, right? So I love these examples. They all make sense, but I think some of it is less clear, less focused. I think I gave this one 5. I don't remember, 4 or 5. I'm always happy. I think I gave this a 4. I don't remember. So the biggest problem. So this was great. I agree with Grossman when she argues. Amazing. What's missing though is because. And then let's call this
Professor,
again.
sorry interrupt you.
Please.
One question
Please.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
You said that the first one is perfect, but it's copied almost exactly what it didn't put quote, for example,
Yeah.
said translation matter because this is a crucial to our sense of ourselves as humans. It's almost the same.
It is.
Should be put it in an I don't know, with quotes or something, no? Because it's almost the same.
Some people did, some people didn't. Again, I think, like I said, you're right. Maybe forgive me for saying the word perfect. It's a dangerous word in academic writing. But I do think for me, because we're still learning this template, this structure, I'm very happy, even if a student just copy and pasted. But you're right, Didya, it is better to paraphrase or summarize in your own words. It is, it is, it is. Or like you said, if you use the exact same words, put it in quotes. You're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But again, because it's only week what? This is now week 5, but last week was only week 4. We're still learning. So I'm still happy with this. I really am. It's like, okay, this student learned what the structure and is practicing it, Any other ideas about this example? You ready for the 6 out of 6? Let's look at it. Yes, Candy.
Professor?
Yeah, Candy and then Draga. I saw Candy first and then Draga, you're next. Candy, please.
Professor, one question. So the magic word in the first sentence in the matter because the magic word is why is crucial.
Okay, not really. The magic word is because, and then because is where you give your ideas, right, Candy? This, and like Didier said, this is Grossman's ideas, right? These are Grossman's words. So the magic thing that's missing is because, and then I'm going to make it big again. I'm in caps, Manisha. Your topic sentence, right? Your main idea, you telling me why you agree with this very specific idea or question. Make sense?
Yeah, but for my answer is in the principle and in the top,
Yeah.
the sentence. If I read this sentence, I'm going to ask me why. Why is crucial? Why? This is my question. Why is crucial? That's wrong or is bad?
Well, I think let me say this. Don't worry about that in this class because I will give you the question. You don't need to think, why is it crucial? I tell you, all I'm asking you is, do you agree or disagree? Right? So again, a good question should make it clear what the teacher wants you to say. You know what I'm saying?
It's a question. Do you agree or disagree, and why not?
Exactly.
So,
exactly. But before you tell me, before you can start writing, do I agree or disagree? You have to understand the thing that I'm asking you to agree or disagree with. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Great question. Draga, what's up?
The problem is we cannot answer your questions because we don't see Grossman's introduction. So it's hard to answer all your questions because we cannot see that text that we can talk about that and answer
It's right.
your question.
Well, it's right here though. I mean, it says read the preface and it's right here, Draga. The whole thing, right? You can read it, either download it or it's yeah, I mean, it's right here for you to read.
Yeah, but should we answer from the entire introduction?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if I ask you, if I say read this, yeah, I expect you to read the whole thing. Yeah.
So how to answer with only 50 words? It's
well, I know you. Well, again, Draga, remember, you could. If anybody knows, remember, I don't want to push back on Draga, but Draga could take 300, right? She could take 300. So I just, for people who feel like this is too slow, Draga, you might not be the only one. Remember, I'm trying to teach skills that people haven't learned yet. You know what I mean? But you know, Draga, you can send me whatever you want. I did that this week. I'll look at anything you got. I'll look at it. You know me. Anybody else? We'll look at the last example. Cool. Last one. I completely agree with Grossman's statement that translation, here's Didier's quotes, matters because it is crucial to our sense of ourselves as humans. Now, again, we're missing a because, but let's notice here, although we are the same type of creation, we are still very different. The main difference is a language on which we communicate. There are countless types of vernaculars across all over the world and times. And what translation, I'm going to just change this, I'm sorry, does is connecting all the people to each other and makes us more humane, opens new horizons on who we are, helps us to better understand others, which is also one of the main attributes of humanity. Okay, now this student, again, grammar errors, we know, they didn't give me a because, but I could imagine this sentence, right? We could move this up here and say because, and this would be these are clearly to me, the reasons that this student agrees with Grossman's argument, right? Like these are very specific reasons that the author gives me for why they agree with Grossman. And that's why it's a 6 out of 6 in this example, right? Like it's very clearly, like I can't say it even any better, I guess, than that. Like it's very specific. It answers the specific question by giving a very clear reason, right? Even though we're missing my magic word because. And this is like Draga's point, right? Like there's no one like when I'm talking to Draga about people are in different places using different styles. You know, the format, the structure I'm teaching you for how to respond, you don't need to say, I agree with author when they say summary, because you don't have to do that for every response. But when you're first learning how to do this, I think it's really helpful to have one of those examples, you know? So even though this student didn't use that because template, this last sentence to me is like super clear and super clear and connected to the specific question that I'm asking. Any other ideas or when do we see the difference between these three? Like why one is a 3 and one is a 4 and one is a 6? Does this make sense, you guys? I keep thinking about Draga's point. Of course, Draga, I agree with you. You can't talk about translation and humanity in 50 words, but we got to start somewhere, you know. But any other any ideas about this 6 out of 6? What do you notice? What do you like? Do you understand why this is a 6? I hope you do. There's no talk about technology or textbooks or science. You know what I mean? Like it's very clearly focused on language, 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 humanity, 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 right? I mean, that is absolute, and translation, right? Language, language, translation, translation, humanity, humanity. I think this is a great example of a student really fully answering the specific question that I asked. Candy.
Professor, sorry, what is the mean for vernaculars?
Como variedades, varieties, kind of.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. My non-Spanish speakers, I'm sorry. I don't know the word varieties in Farsi or Pashto or Dari or Russian, Ukrainian.
Translate in Spanish, but in Spanish, same word, similar
Yeah,
word.
I think it's a French word. Yeah, I think it's a French word originally. Vernacular. It's a Spanish word that no one ever uses. Yeah, something like that. Okay, cool. Well, then if this makes sense, then I've got one more thing to show you, and then we'll talk about narrative structure. So as an example, and maybe don't be surprised if you see this question again, but I want to talk about it to make sure that if this was a question I asked you, I want to make sure you understand the specific questions that I'm asking. Okay. Oh, this was my mistake. I'm sorry. MLA formatting. At the end of Arab Past, American Future, Lauren Alwan writes that the naming and sharing of our history can help bring about a better understanding of who we truly are. Do you agree or disagree? Use one example from the story and one example from your own life to support your opinion. Okay, now here's my question to you. What am I asking you to do here? In this question, what is the specific idea I want you to respond to?
It looks like you are asking us to connect how the sharing of story, it doesn't matter, mine story, your story, or whose history, yeah, how the sharing helps us to better understand who we are.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna sort of keep going, Henry. I'm just gonna start making a list here to make sure. And again, I know that I say this all the time, but I promise sort of what we're doing here is kind of like a reading strategy, right? I'm sort of trying to teach you how to critically read a question so that you know what I'm asking you, right? So key ideas to respond to. History. I heard Henry talk about history. Yeah. What's another idea that we need to make sure we respond to, Henry?
Does it make us better to understand ourselves?
Understanding ourselves.
Good. And what about history? I think there's another key word even before history. I think there's another important word.
Sharing.
Thank you, Lasana. Thank you. Yes, I think so too. Yeah. So we could say sharing, Excuse me, I'm sorry. So again, I'm sort of trying to use color coding here. I don't know. This is how my brain works, so sorry if yours isn't that way. So I think you're right. Here are the two main ideas: sharing our history, understanding ourselves better. And we're looking at the connection between these two main ideas. And then I ask you to do something else that's very specific here. And if you don't do it, you'll lose points. So then I say, do you agree or disagree? And then what important information do we get here?
To use our background
Yep.
in supporting the idea.
Yep. I'm thinking of Candy's question earlier when she was like, okay, is this what I should be asking myself? I love that. And that's kind of how I'm going to organize this here, Candy. So you should first be thinking, the first thing you should think is, do I understand the idea that Jeff is telling me to read, right? Do I understand that this idea from the story? Naming and sharing our history can help bring about a better understanding of who we truly are. That means I need to think about sharing history, understanding ourselves, and how they're connected to each other, right? So then you should be asking yourself, do I agree or disagree? Why? And what is one example from the story? What is one example from my personal life? Like Candy, this is, when you, again, it's probably not a surprise now, you will do this, you will write this eventually next week. This is what, in a perfect world, these are the questions that come into your head when you read this, Candy. And not just Candy, but everybody. I love her question, right, Jeff? What should I be thinking when I read this? I love that. I really love that. So that's what I would say, right? That's what I would say. So more examples for ways to sort of do critical reading, really thoughtful and careful critical reading to make sure that you understand what I'm asking you so that you know what to write. Does this make sense? You'll be ready for this question and other examples like it when you see it again. Candy, don't say no. Any other? Because if there aren't questions, now I'm going to switch. We'll take a breath. We'll think about narrative writing. We'll start to talk about our book and a map of lost things. So, any last questions? Anything, you guys, about this response stuff? Anything that we talked about here?
Yes.
Yeah, Lasana.
How to include the example from the story? Like,
Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, say more
yes,
about that.
I'm
What,
asking
yeah.
if
Yeah,
it is
please.
the right word for word, the thing we see on the story, or we have to rewrite it in our own vocabulary, but
Great
it's the
question.
same idea from the story.
Yeah. Again, college level writing, probably best if you can, when you're comfortable, to summarize and paraphrase, right? And again, we're going to practice summarizing and paraphrasing much more specifically when we do hyperfocus. Okay, so I know I'm telling you, hey, summarize and paraphrase, and you might be thinking, Jeff, I don't know how to do that yet. Okay, but we will get more practice, I promise. So yeah, practice summarizing and paraphrasing the example from the book. Yeah, I don't want to say too much and scare you too much. With a question like this, just do your best, because again, we'll focus much more on, connecting, or a good academic word here is integrating, right? Connecting your writing and examples from the book. We'll talk about that much more when we go to the research kind of nonfiction style writing. Yeah. And the other thing I will say about that lesson is sort of big picture, right? Long term. Part of the answer is how long your answer will be. If a teacher says write 300 words, you know, it's a big difference. Again, like Draga's saying, again, 50 words is very, very short. But if your teacher asked you this question and said 300 words, okay, now maybe you can use 1 or 2 quotes. If your teacher says 500 words, okay, now you can definitely use a quote, you know, word for word. So when to quote, when to summarize, it's kind of like an art, you know, not a science. And how long your answer will be is connected to that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because it's a great question, because if I say, give me 50 words and 45 of your words are just from the book, well, you didn't, well, no district, I'm not saying this to Lasana, but then you didn't really write much, you know, you just used the author's words. So that's one reason it's good to think that way, you know. So that's why I always tell students in this class, I love to hopefully make it easy for you guys to practice summarizing and paraphrasing, because in 340, we get to talk all semester long about quoting and integrating sources and all that good stuff. So the more comfortable you feel paraphrasing, same idea, your words, the better. Definitely. I know it's hard. Excellent question. Amazing question. Anybody else?
I just would like to tell what is difficult for me, maybe for other people as
Sure,
well.
please.
Yeah, the problem again for me is because this introduction about translation is something we have never thought about. So it is something completely new. It is very thoughtful. It's very it opens our eyes for something completely new, you know. So it is difficult because we have to make decision about something what we don't understand completely, or it's something new. So that's what is difficult for me to answer that question short in just, let's say, 50 words. I have to have my opinion. I have to analyze, to understand it, to completely become my thoughts and then answer. So, but it is fantastic. I really like it, but it is difficult to answer.
Amen, Draga. Yes, it is. And Draga, it just sort of perfectly explained why this is so hard. Draga, you are 100% correct. And again, that's why in this class I go slow, because eventually, right, this type of question is sort of like a classic example of a midterm or final for a humanities or a social sciences class. In a history class, it might say, read this 2-page article. You know, you have 2 hours, right? Read this article you've never seen before, and then write a 500-word response to it. Now, again, I won't, some teachers might do 325 that way. I won't do that to you. It's too painful. But like I said, Draga, and everybody, I feel like it's my job to get you ready to do that, right? So that's why I try and explain exactly what I'm asking you to do. And Draga, you just explained why it's so difficult perfectly. It's a new idea. And for you guys, it's a second, third, fourth language. Again, many native English speakers, history teachers or psychology teachers, they don't even think about that for a lot of their multilingual students, right? Bilingual students. So you're right though, right? Read something new, understand it. Now write 500 words about this new idea. It's really hard. It's really hard, but it is a sort of skill that is expected of students at university level, and you're 1 class away from university level. You know, you're 1 class away. So excellent point, Draga. I totally agree. Didia, please.
Yeah, one question, Professor. Is we need to put the examples, the 2 examples from my own history and from the history and from my personal, because if we don't have, we have to invent something, right? Yeah. But we need to put 2 examples?
Again, I'm trying to show you a variety, a lot of different examples of response questions or essays. So again, it's a boring answer, Didier, but the real answer is do exactly what your teacher tells you to do in the question, right? And that's what I'm trying to have you practice. So the first example we did is like, hey, agree or disagree, why? Pretty wide open, right? And now here's one. I'm getting you ready to see an example where use one from the story, one from your personal life, right? So it really just depends on what, in this class, of course, what I ask you, but what other professors ask you in the future, you know? And if their questions aren't specific, then you've got some freedom, right? You can kind of use personal examples or whatever, you've got some freedom there, you've got some choices. But again, I'm trying to show you a variety of these type of questions to help you practice that reading skill of like, wait a minute. What is Jeff asking me? Wait, what is the teacher asking me? Because I need to make sure I do exactly what the question is asking, right? Yeah, great question. Again, amazing questions. Lasana and Draga and Didier, amazing. Thank you. Everybody, everybody so far. Manisha's great questions and yeah, Marcia's example earlier, amazing. You guys are amazing tonight. Any other ideas or questions? All right, that's enough of my big head. We'll go back to sharing my screen here. Okay, so now again, I know we're kind of turning back to narrative writing here. So we're kind of change your brain, right? Change your brain for a second because we're going back to narrative writing. I also wanted to show you if you're at your computer and you want to follow along with some of this activity here. Let me show you. It's under live support materials. Today I have a few pages from A Map of Lost Things annotated, so you can preview this or download it and follow along with me on your own screen right now, whatever you want. It looks like this. I'll tell you what this is and what it means in a second here. But just I wanted to show you that's already here, okay? That what I'm going to show you on the screen is already in Canvas. You can find it there if you want right now, the live support materials page. Okay, but just my fast review and reminder about what we talked about last week. The sort of 3 parts of narrative writing structure that you're going to read, that you did read in the first 6 stories of the book. And that, of course, next week, I'm going to give you the assignment for what I want you to write, the structure that I want you to write. So remember, a first-person narrative is a type of creative or academic writing that expresses the relationship between the writer's experience and their identity. The writer does this through a narrative, telling a story, and in that narrative, they introduce a theme. They describe their thoughts, feelings, and experiences, and then return to this theme throughout the narrative. And again, all of this is sort of big picture review. We'll look at examples in a second here. So narrative writing. I got the color wrong here, you guys. I have all my beautiful colors and then I mess them up. Okay, narrative writing. Narrative writing just means we use first person pronouns, I and we. You saw that in all of the stories in A Map is Only One Story. It is used throughout the writing. It tells a story with a beginning, middle, and end. And then this story must have a clear connection to the theme, right? Now, again, before everybody got here, Henry was sort of saying, well, you know, the first story about the river and the, you know, people, the border and stuff, you know, I wasn't sure it was just a story. I love when Henry said it's just a story because I think he's talking about something important here, right? So a story just means beginning, middle, and end. And whether we love it, whether we love every story in this book or not, you know, that's fine. But I promise you, every story in this book is a narrative. It has something happens, right? Beginning, middle, and end. Something happens to the narrator. The narrator tells the reader something that happened in their life. First we did this, then we moved here, then she said that. we understand, right? But the big challenge for a lot of people at this level at 325 is how to make sure that the story has a clear connection to a theme. And that's what I'll talk about next. But first, descriptive writing, right? Descriptive writing is used throughout the writing. It uses a lot of specific details connected to the 5 senses. It allows the reader to see the things that are part of the narrative, and it may be used to help to connect the story with the deeper theme. And finally, the theme. The theme should be introduced early in the writing. It is usually returned to throughout the writing. And there are usually key words, ideas, and images that are repeated in the writing. And then is finally often synthesized, summarized, or echoed. You have very literary words here. You feel the echo of an idea that was at the beginning of the story comes back at the end. Okay. Now, for the rest of class tonight, we're going to sort of analyze and look at a map of lost things, thinking about these 3 different aspects, parts of narrative writing structure. Now, I've got an electronic copy that I'm going to use on the screen right now. But as I say here, sorry, you guys, this will help us. But as I say here, it's on page 15 to 26. So you can look at your screen with me. You can look at your book and listen, whatever is best for you. Okay. So we're just going to see how much we can get through. Hopefully everybody did. I'd love to hear. Henry was talking about this. So anybody else, because Henry got to share a little bit, hopefully, if you read this, if you had time, what did we think about this story just before we look at the structure? What did you think? What did you feel? Did you like this story? I'd love to just a few minutes about your response, right? Your response. And my question is, what'd you think? What'd you think of this story? Didia, please.
Well, I think it's so tough because it's part of the feeling that a lot of migrants have when they are living in different parts. And I think all the migrants, as also the person who wrote this narrative, that they lost their identity because they are in different part and they don't belong to anywhere. Excellent. So it's so tough, and a lot of things that they say that it's so, well, struggling.
Yes.
The heart,
yes.
because it's difficult to live that kind
yes.
of things.
Yes, yes. So absolutely, Didia is saying that there can be a very personal or emotional connection to this story because of similar experiences or immigrant experience. Yeah, absolutely, Didia. And again, I'm going to suggest, Draga, I see your hand next. I'm going to suggest the reason that you feel that way is theme, right? Anybody could say, I was born in, my parents are from Somalia, then we moved to Canada, then we moved to Portland, then my sister died. I'm really confused about who I am. That's it, right? That could be a narrative, but the theme is the thing that I think, well, I'm going to argue, gives you that deeper feeling, like you're talking about, Didia, is it gives it some personal meaning, right? And that theme is what can create that feeling in the reader, right? And it's kind of, it's one reason I love reading and writing so much. I think it's like a magic trick, people who can really share their story in a meaningful way and connect with, if a listener or a reader. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, I think. Draga, you want to share?
Yeah, I think the story is very, very deep. I read it twice and listened to your recordings twice. After first reading, I didn't get it, but after second time, I really like that very much. So I think everything is about map, but something much more deeper than I ever thought. So as she said, a map is only one layer. Okay, we see only one layer, but there are so many things. History, she mentioned some details from the history, what we don't see in maps. Okay, and then she also leads actually 2 stories. Her story, then a wider story about people who migrate and who always thought they would go back to their country they came from, and about salmon fish, which which have naturally that sense to turn back, even to die, you know, just multiply and to die. Only what I didn't like, if I can share with you, is the end. Is the end. I don't understand. It is so different from anything else. Okay, it is also about map. I understand map is maybe a theme, or I don't know, but everything is about map throughout the story. It is fantastic. I only do not like it because she finished with that detail from her personal life. I would finish with the part in the book when she talked. I also was talking about that in quiz 11. I think it's quiz 11. Yeah, I think when she talks, when people ask me who I am, where I am, where am I coming from? So I would finish with that because it is so deep, it is so thoughtful, and somehow it is above the story she finished.
And
that's
interesting. I love it. I love everything Draga said. I want to say two things, and then I see Asha's comment in the chat, which made me so happy. Draga said something really important there. You're going to hear me say it this week. You're going to hear me say it next week. You're going to hear me, well, you're going to see me write it in your first draft. Remember, a narrative essay like this might include more than one story. I love that Draga said, well, this is one story, right? It's one essay, it's one thing, but inside that one story, we get some information about her, about Jamila. We get a story about her family, her parents, right? We even have a story about where she goes back to Somalia to see her grandmother, right? We kind of have more than one narrative, more than one story inside this one essay. And that's okay, right? That's totally fine. Now, again, for your essays, I don't want you to feel like you need to do something really, really complex. If you just want to write a story, a narrative about the first day of school or the day that your child was born, perfect. That's beautiful. But when I say narrative means a story with beginning, middle, and end, that doesn't mean that there can only be one beginning, middle, and end in 20 pages. So I love that Draga pointed that out. The other thing that Draga pointed out that I want to go back to my point about the theme here. One big clue that the author is talking about some theme, some deeper meaning, maybe a symbol. Now, again, this is not a literature class, but symbols, right? Things that have deeper meaning, key words, key ideas, or images that keep coming back. Draga is absolutely right. The map keeps coming up. The word map keeps coming up. In fact, we get lots of synonyms for map, right? We get topography and we get lots of different words that are connected to maps. So Draga is exactly correct to say, I'm not sure, maybe that's theme. Again, you're on the right path, right? You're on the right path if you go, she keeps talking about maps, like what's up there? And a lot of other people have pointed out the salmon, right? There's what, I understand sometimes students are like, this fish, what's up with the fish? Who cares? But if you have that feeling like, why are they talking about the fish so much? Maybe ask yourself, why? What's the deeper meaning there? What's the deeper meaning there? Now, again, I want to look at the structure here. We're kind of having a thematic conversation. So Draga was saying at the end of the story, you guys remember, she gets lost. She doesn't know where she's going, and she's very upset. She gets very emotional. But and Draga is saying, well, that interesting. She ended with that moment. I'm not sure why. Maybe that moment was too. Draga didn't say this, but she felt too sad or too scared or too confused or something. But then Asha does say something important when she notes in the chat, well, she does find her way, even though it's with assistance from her father. So now, again, it's a good time for me to say, there doesn't only have to be one theme in the story, right? I think if we say that maps are a good symbol or a theme, family and the meaning of family is a big idea or a big theme in the story too. So I'm not going to take a side. I'm not going to say if I agree or disagree with Draga about, what the author should do. But I do think Asha's point in the chat is really important context to add to Draga's point, right? Which is, yes, she gets lost. Yes, she's crying. Yes, she's freaked out. But then she does get back home, right? She eventually finds her way home. And see, this is where I get emotional talking about this story too. Did you? It's her father, right? Her connection to her father, even though they're in a new country, right? It's her father. Her father's the one who brings her home. So anyway, I love Draga's idea, and I love Asha's idea. And again, if you like this stuff, after you take 300, come take my 350 class, because this thematic analysis is more like a literature class, right? It's why I don't want us to go too deep and scare people away. But I want to go back to what I said to Didier, and then we're going to look at specific pages. Understanding why or how a story like this touches your heart or affects your feelings, that's theme. And when I ask you to do narrative writing so that you get some practice with this structure, I do want you to think about that, right? Like, what's the deeper feeling? How can I make some connection to other people? Because this is a really important part about narrative writing. Whether you're doing narrative writing about something really deep and personal, like immigration or family, those deep things, or any narrative that you're writing about your experience at school, your experience at work, there still has to be some deeper reason that your reader will care. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm talking about when I say theme. Okay. Amazing. Oh my God. I went into literature teacher there for a minute, you guys. Let's look at the story. Again, I'm going to project the first few pages, and we're going to do a really sort of short, not easy, but hopefully pretty clear activity here. Excuse me, let me scroll down. Right, so as I say here, I'm on page 15. We're going to start on page 15. And I'm going to make my face big for a second too. All I want us to do as we go through this together, we're going to go sort of page by page. And what I want you to think about is, on these pages that we read together, can you show me some examples of where you think you see narrative writing, of where you see descriptive writing, and where you see a theme or repeated symbols, right? And then when I say here in Canvas, as I showed you live support materials annotated, I promise I'm going to give you these examples. I'm going to sort of try and show you where, okay, here's clearly some example of descriptive writing. Here's very clearly some example of narrative writing. And that's what I'm trying to again, help you be more critical readers so that you can see the structure that's in front of you so that you can do it when I ask you to write it. Okay, so let's start with the first page. And I'll just read, I'll read aloud, and then, like I said, follow along with me, and then be ready to tell me on just this first page, look for examples of narrative writing, story, descriptive writing, 5 senses, theme. All right. A Map of Lost Things by Jamila Osman. When I was in the 4th grade in Portland, we spent 3 months studying the Chinook salmon, the Oregon state fish. Our unit culminated in a class field trip to a small creek off the Columbia River Gorge. At Eagle Creek, a small basin where the Columbia runs into the Pacific, the Chinook salmon comes to spawn, having crossed thousands of miles of sea in a journey that takes many years. When the female salmon finds her way back to the same estuary of her birth, she will lay anywhere from 3,000 to 14,000 eggs before dying. The estuary is where the river meets the sea. It is the collision of 2 worlds. It's where the new world meets the old world, where life crashes head first into death. Death is always the final act. As we watched the salmon return to the estuaries they'd left so many years ago, I was filled with a jealousy that hollowed out my chest. I envied the salmon and their bloated bodies, the way they shimmered under the water when the sun's rays caught against their scales. I've returned to this same creek many times as an adult, and I still feel the same sense of jealousy I felt at 9 years old. I sit on the wet earth and hold my knees against my chest as I watch the salmon spawn. On clear nights at the creek, the moon floats just over the surface of the water. The landscape is blurred and distorted, hazy and untrue in the mirror of the water. I look at the moon against the river and feel a hunger crest in me. The salmon return at the same time every year, haggard, gray, molten. I envy the certainty of their journey. Sometimes I run into hikers and tourists as I walk the trail to the creek. Where are you from? They will inevitably ask me. Portland? I answer their question with a question of my own. Portland? My last syllable lifts its head in desire. Okay, just this page. Let's talk about it. Narrative, let's start really simple. I'll give you the first one. We know there's narrative. We know there's some kind of story. So just in these first few paragraphs, she's telling us a story about what? What is happening in this narrative that she gives us to start the story?
She talks about her experience when she was a fourth grade student, about going to watch salmon to spawn. So
good. Draga, oh, go ahead. I just want to say one thing real quick and then keep going. Draga said something important, fourth grade, right? The first sentence, when I was in the fourth grade, Draga brought that up and she is right? When we say narrative writing, you're thinking about these WH questions often. When, right? If it's a when, it's an important detail for the story, right? When does the story happen, right? Good, good, good. Keep going, Draga. I wanted to make sure I said that to everybody though. And what other, for example, I'll ask Draga. So we know when, but how about where? We get lots of where.
Yeah, we know where. We know she lived in Portland, and they went to Chinook Salmon, Oregon. So every single detail where it happened is mentioned here. Eagle Creek,
Good.
Oregon.
Good.
Chinook
There it is.
Salmon,
good.
River,
I love it.
Pacific. Every
Good.
single detail. Yeah.
I love it. So Draga I love when I say where, Draga gives me some of those those proper nouns, right? Eagle Creek, Oregon, Portland, Columbia River Gorge, Columbia River. And then this isn't a proper noun, but estuary, right? These are places, right? These details. I know that I was saying about sort of descriptive details, but this information, maybe I won't say details twice, but this WH question information, when and where, this is all part of a narrative. So if again, I keep saying as an example, because I've read many students for their essay will write, my first day at college in the United States, an amazing topic, fantastic. But if you do that, you got to tell me when was it, right? Where was it? And you got to give me some of those basic information, that basic information that we need in a story, right? Excellent, excellent.
Can we tell just one more sentence, Mr. Jeff?
Sure, yeah, please.
Yeah, the interesting thing is behind this introduction, behind this narrative, that is a theme, a map, because we have Oregon, we have Portland, we have other different data. So behind everything is a map, which is a theme of the story.
Good, I love it. Draga's starting to make critical connections. I love it, that's great. How about, good, excellent. So Draga's giving us good information about the narrative. We get where, we get when, even though we don't know a year, we understand, okay, the author, Jamila, was a child. This is fourth grade in Portland, Oregon. Now, I want to, again, practice sort of training your eye to notice these things. We can never really say one sentence is, 100% narrative, right? Or 100% descriptive. And I want to look at example. In this third sentence, excuse me, at Eagle Creek, a small basin where the Columbia River runs into the Pacific, the Chinook salmon comes to spawn, having crossed thousands of miles of sea in a journey that takes many years. I think in this one sentence, we get some good narrative and we get some descriptive detail, right? What are the words in this sentence that give me a specific description to help me imagine the place? Anybody, if no one else wants to, I can keep talking to Draga, that's fine. But anybody else wants to get in there? Where are some descriptions that help me imagine this place in that one sentence?
The,
Yeah, Henry,
the
please.
yeah, the whole article introduction is just a combination of narrative and description parts, and in this particular part of the article, I mean, we can't find anything like I or we. So she just describes the place and the process, what is going on at the place, and we can call this descriptive. And also, I have a question about, we are talking about the article structure or about the idea structure?
No, we're talking about narrative writing structure, the structure of narrative writing, understanding how this idea of narrative, description, and theme come together to create a narrative.
Yeah, I just want to make clear it is because if we are talking about writing structure, we are talking about writing structure, not about what is behind or something, right?
Well, I understand your point, Henry, but first of all, I just asked people for their general response. And again, in a good story, and I definitely believe this is one, it's very hard to separate these out, right? I mean, it's if it's a good story, it's hard to say, well, that has nothing to do with the theme, right? Obviously, it does in a way, but I understand your point too. I totally do.
Yeah, no, I excuse me. I mean, if we're talking about the idea, it's I can say it's completely doesn't matter what is going on in Portland, in Oregon, and what is going on. Just I think the author Jamila wants to connect with. She starts introduction not just because the introduction, yeah. She starts introduction to connect us as readers to the topic, and he shows what is the home, for the fish.
You're right.
It doesn't matter where the female comes from, and
Excellent.
it doesn't matter the way where spawn it, and maybe the whole idea of about the way, the way.
I love it.
Sometimes we don't have home. Sometimes we just love the way to home.
Good.
And
Good.
she shows it in the introduction. It could be in Oregon. It could be, I don't know, in Somali or something else, somewhere else. And just if we're talking about structure, let's talk about structure. But if we talk about idea, we need to talk about. I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about idea and structure. If we are talking about structure, let's talk about structure, and it's more helpful. And idea is very different thing, and it doesn't make sense to talk both in the same time because we are not to have so much vocabulary to do it in time.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you, Henry, but I hear you and I appreciate your point. Yeah. In the chat, I saw a few people answering my question about, can you find some phrases or words that have specific descriptions? Marzia made me so happy when Marzia says, small basin, description, right? She says, the Columbia River Gorge, right? And then, or Eagle Creek, excuse me. What's Eagle Creek? Well, it's a small basin where the Columbia River runs into the Pacific. Asha says too, the fish swim thousands of miles. I agree completely. Anytime you see numbers, dates, and details, now again, we're getting, now we're getting more and more specific. We're getting more and more descriptive, right? I love that. Great. But one thing I do agree with Henry on is time. Time is very valuable. So let me show you what I've given you here with this annotated for the first few pages. So if you download it, it'll show you here. And what I have for you here is I have 3 different colors in here, okay? So I'm saying yellow is narrative, an example of narrative structure. Pink is an example of descriptive detail, and orange is some examples of thematic, right? Where the author's introducing themes, right? So on that page we just read, I sort of exactly like Jaga pointed out, I've got Portland, Oregon, Columbia River Gorge, Eagle Creek, Columbia River, Pacific. I've got all these examples in yellow, right? And then I also have yellow for I have returned to this same creek many times as an adult. These are just events, right? These are just things that happen. And then in pink, I didn't even highlight the pink example, but I totally agree with Marcia here where she says a small basin. But at the bottom of this page, we've got some very specific examples of descriptive writing, right? Where she's describing the fish. I envied the salmon and their bloated bodies, the way they shimmered under the water when the sun's rays caught their scales, right? Description, description, description. What does it look like, right? More examples of descriptive writing. I sit on the wet earth. On clear nights, the moon floats just over the surface of the water. The landscape is blurred and distorted, hazy and untrue in the mirror of the water. This is like classic descriptive writing, right? It's describing literally what it looks like when a character is sitting, seeing something. These are examples of descriptive writing, right? And then in orange on this first page, I've got, well, you know, and here's the thing, right? The first time you read these stories, you might not know what's orange and what's not. But like Drago was saying, if you say map, 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 big clue. And even on this first page, I tried to highlight every time or almost every time it says salmon, I've got salmon, 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 salmon. I mean, we've got all, we definitely have, remember, going back to my PowerPoint slide here, right? We definitely have keywords, ideas, and images that repeat over and over again. Not even in this example that I'm looking at on this first story, not just in the whole story. I'm talking about like the first 2 pages, you know, we get salmon, 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 right? So again, I'm going to keep the key up here. Does this make sense? Just that section that I just read of sort of trying to understand how a narrative comes together. Again, now I'm going to keep thinking about Henry saying you can talk about structure and meaning separately. That's hard for me. I don't know if I agree. It's interesting, but thinking about this, do we start to see, I'll leave it up here, but take a look and tell me, do we agree, disagree? Does this make sense, what I'm asking you to be aware of, sort of noticing narrative, structure, narrative, descriptive writing and theme? Do we agree, disagree, please?
Everything is very clear, very obvious.
Droga. Is there anyone for whom it is not as obvious and I can answer questions? Otherwise, we'll keep going. Let's keep going. And again, I want you to do the same thing. I'm going to keep going here. Probably, yeah, we'll stop at this page. Okay, so same thing on this next section. Either, you know, if you're already looking at the annotated, that's great, but follow along with me. I want examples that you're ready to share with me, narrative, descriptive, and thematic. So nobody leaves home thinking they will never be able to return. I wonder what my parents would have taken with them when they left their home in Somalia in the late 80s. Who might they have made amends with? What old haunts would they have visited one last time if they knew they would never be back? My parents ended up in Oregon, and by the time I was in middle school, we had already lived in 5 different apartment complexes. When my teachers would ask me where I was from, I'd shrug. I already learned to be part of a diaspora was to live freely, to make no promises. In phone calls to faraway relatives, my parents always swore they would return, but Distance and time make liars of us all. It was not that my family disliked Portland. We loved many things about the city, especially its spring days, warm and wet, but it was a cautious love. My parents had loved a place once before, and neither of them had ever fully recovered from the war that had leveled Somalia in the early 90s or its aftermath. How could they recover? War is not a cough, it's a cancer. The Somali government officially collapsed in 1991. My parents, abroad for the first time, found themselves unable to return. Newly married, my mother pregnant with me, they lived for a brief time in Canada. During their first winter in Edmonton, there was a devastating snowstorm. My mother had never seen snow before. Her lips and knuckles were always bleeding in the cold. Everything in this new world was a small wound. My father, previously a student, became a cab driver in this new country. It didn't take him long before he no longer needed to use a map to take people to the places they needed to go: banks and doctor's appointments, hair salons and shopping malls. Soon he knew his way around Alberta so well that if he didn't speak with an accent, one would have thought he was born and raised there. He knew which roads to take and which to avoid. He knew the fastest route to the airport and where to find the back roads when the city closed around him like a fist. Well, let's talk again. Narrative. What is she narrating here? What's the story we get here? And I think we kind of get more than one, but what kind of narrative information, basic narrative information, do we get here?
She's talking about her private story about her family, how they moved, and moving from one apartment to the other one, how they reacted to the snow to different parts of the world because they never experienced that. So she's talking about her family, and also, which is again behind the narrative, about her father, who knew so well Portland that he didn't need a map. And behind it, we see actually Salmon, which also don't need a map, but they come back.
There it is.
always
There
to
it
the
is.
same place.
I'm like you, Draga. I'm a big theme person. Maybe that's why I keep thinking about Henry's exam. It's interesting. I'm a big theme person too. But I love it. So Draga there talked about she talked about Jamila moving apartments. Okay, that's definitely part of the narrative here. In the chat, I see Sadaf says the Somali government officially collapsed. Excellent. And the only thing I'd add, Sadaf, is what year, right? We get information. The Somali government collapsed when, right? Remember, narrative, basic narrative information's WH questions, right? When, where, why, how, right? That's a lot of the narrative. So we get the Somali government officially collapsed, example of narrative. And it says, I think in 91, right? Over here on this page. Yes, good. Fauzia is saying her life, Sadaf wrote, yeah, 1991, thank you. Now Fauzia is saying her life. Now, if I say, what is the narrative of this story about? Her life is too general. We need, because, you know, again, that's an example of again, like I could tell you, I could say this as an example. All right, everybody, like I'm going to tell you a story about my life. I was born in 1982, and then I moved to the Bay Area, and now I live in Sacramento. You know what I mean? Like that's her life is sort of too generic, especially when you're doing an analysis of a story like this, or when you're going to write your own story. So if I say, hey, what do you want to write your own narrative about? Saying my life, we got to make it more specific, right? We got to make it more specific. Fauzi is saying she's describing her country. Well, let's talk about descriptions in a minute. So like Doug is saying, we get information about Jamila's life in the United States, right? We get information about the Somali government collapsing in 1991. We also get some important information about her parents, right? At the very beginning here, I wonder what my parents would have taken with them when they left their home, Somalia, in the late 80s. This is the first time we see the word Somalia in this story, right? Before this sentence, we didn't know where Jamila's family came from, right? So this would definitely be an example of basic narrative information that we think about when, where, and how these things happened, right? Okay, so we get some narrative about her parents leaving Somalia. We get some narrative about her experience moving apartments. We get some narrative about the Somalia government collapsing. Draga did mention we get some narrative about her parents' first snowstorm, right? That's definitely a story that we get in here. And then, like Draga said, we also get some narrative. We get some, events in this last paragraph about her father, right? And I think we get some. This last paragraph is a good way for me to switch and ask. Now, where are some examples of sentences in these just few paragraphs of description? Where do we get descriptive writing? What it looked like, what it felt like, what it sounded like? Where do we get some examples of that type of writing in these pages?
We have it on the second page, third paragraph, when she talks about her mother. But if you allow me, I would like just to tell something I have just realized, that here is mentioned like her lips and knuckles were always bleeding. And later, or maybe we already read it, that Salmon also bleeding on their way, going back. And also we see that map is already mentioned regarding her father. Yes. And maps are behind the salmon. So she, even though it is not mentioned, but we can, if we go deeply to the story, if we remember all details, we'll see that she is repeating same words for two different stories. And
good.
We are connected.
Excellent, excellent. Now again, Draga is what can I say? Draga has a lot of experience thinking deeply about texts. But her examples. So again, if you're listening right now or you're watching the recording and you're like, I'm not sure what Draga's point was, that's fine. You're still learning. But Draga's example is important because if you notice a detail, a descriptive detail, map, that's a very specific noun. That's a thing. Why is it repeating? Or blood as an image. If it's repeating, now we're going to start to connect back to theme, right? Like Draga is saying. But I love that Draga is absolutely correct. This sentence here about her lips and knuckles were always bleeding in the cold. This is a very descriptive detail, right? That is very different than saying, my mom had never seen snow. Oh, good, interesting, basic information. But her lips and her fingers bleeding, it's a pain, right? Again, we cannot maybe feel like, oh my God, that's so painful. And that's because we get that descriptive detail that helps us see, imagine, feel what's going on in the story, right? So I'm glad that Draga gave us that example sentence. Anybody else, either raise your hand or put it in the chat. Yes, did you please? What other examples of descriptions do we get?
Professor, I have a question because
Please.
I don't have a clear, because I am a little bit confused, because narrative and description, I think makes me confused because it's details. For example, narrative is when, where, how, and description is all details as well, and they are going to describe things. So I'm a little bit confused which one is and where are, I don't know. I am confusing about both.
Sure. If I'm gonna make my face big here for a second. It's hard to explain the difference, especially because I don't like to show you guys bad examples. So let me just say this. If I say to you, Didia, I live in a house, would you say that that's narrative or descriptive?
Narrative.
Right, because maybe
details, right?
Exactly, and maybe I should I want to be careful if I'm not explaining it clearly. I'm sorry, but because I can make sure I say this in a more focused way. Description. Think about the five senses. think about look, feel, smell, touch, taste, right? That's because if I say I live in a house, good, interesting, important information. Saying I live in a house, well, that's different than saying I live in an apartment. And that's different than saying I live in my car. And that's different than saying I live in a tent, right? That's important. That's very important information that we need to understand the story. But that is very different than saying I live in a 2-story house with 5 bedrooms and all of the walls are beautifully wallpapered with orange and gold colors. In the main bedroom, there's a purple couch, right? Now, I'm using color in this example, but hopefully you're starting to sort of, you can imagine what that house looks like, right? And now this is where, again, I keep thinking about, Henry, I'm not picking on you. I'm thinking about your comment. But again, narrative description, it's all, I think in a good story, it's really hard to separate meaning and theme because that description of the house I just gave you, that should give you a feeling like, well, that's a rich person's house, right? Or at least a person with some money's house, you know what I mean? Because if I say, I live in a 2-story house with 5 bedrooms and gorgeous wallpapers on the wall, that's a very different theme potentially, or a very different, deeper meaning than I live in a little I live in a little house with 2 bedrooms, it's 900 square feet, and I share that house with my 2 nephews and my 3 uncles, right? Now we're getting details, but that's also telling us something really important about the character, right? Those are different examples. So maybe to make sure I answer Didia's specific question, narrative think the WH questions and accept maybe not how as much, because how can get into detail, right? But when and where, this is basic information, right? And the descriptive details are your 5 senses. It will allow you to see things. It will allow you to hear things. It will help you imagine what it felt like, right? Those are more the descriptive details, right? Because again, in this example, in the story, to say, my mom was so cold, good, true, right? But my mom was so cold, the skin on her knuckles and her lips cracked and bled. I mean, that's some more detail, right? That helps us imagine and feel something, right? Does that make more sense, did you? Yeah. I'm
Yes,
sorry if I think that's the best way to think about it is your narrative is basic information with some of the WH questions. Description's your 5 senses. Description's your 5 senses. What's it feel like? What's it sound like? What's it look like? Yeah. Great question. Really great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, anybody else?
But
Yeah.
it is also important not just to describe how we feel or how something looks like, but as she did in her story, that there is something deeper, there is something
Yes.
behind.
I
So
agree.
yeah.
Well, I agree because I could describe my jacket, right? I could take 2 minutes and I could say, I'm wearing a North Face jacket. It's got blue in the front and the sleeves are gray. There's also some interesting texture here, right? The sleeves are a lot softer. They feel almost like fleece, but this is much more smooth and acrylic. There's these blue lines, and hopefully you're bored, right? Because even though the description's true, it's like, well, who cares, Jeff? Like, why are we talking about your jacket for 2 minutes, right? Even if the description is good, I agree, Draga. If the descriptive details aren't important, your reader will get bored, right? Your reader will get bored. I agree. I never thought I'd talk about.
Excuse me.
Yeah, Henry, please. I never thought I'd
I'm
talk
sorry.
about my jacket so
So
much. Please, Henry.
how depends the importance of details to the structure? I can't understand completely. If we are talking about structure, how depends of the meaning of the details to the structure? It looks like when we are talking about the way to the American Rural College, and we are talking about what kind of car we can get. It's like very different meanings, right? So we are talking about the way to the ARC. but it doesn't matter if you describe your car is very expensive or
Right.
very, very cheap. It doesn't matter. It's still
Right.
the same way, right? And it doesn't matter how the details are important. It still have the same structure. And Draga's question is very important to us at this time, because the how we understand the difference between description and narrative structures of the text, it it how we can keep going on the class, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, that is why I am so
I
I'm
love,
completely agree with Gigia question, and I can't be agree with the comments about how details are important in that question.
That's fine.
You know?
Let me say
Yeah.
one thing. I
Uh-huh.
love that. I love that you used a metaphor about driving directions, right? But there is a big difference in driving directions. There's only one way to get there. I mean, I know you could take different streets to get to ARC, right? But like, no matter what, like you're gonna if you're leaving from downtown Sacramento to get to ARC, there's really only one way to get there, right? There really is only one way to get there. Now, as you can see in this book, even if you only read the 6 examples, there are lots of different ways to use these different parts of narrative writing to tell a story. And maybe now I'm thinking about this word structure, Henry. I'm wondering if when I say structure, it's giving you an image or it's making things unclear. Maybe it's better for you, Henry, to think about these 3 elements, these 3 aspects, these 3 parts of narrative writing, because like I said, you can see like, and Draga's right, structurally, in terms of where Jamila puts the different parts of her story, she could have started her story, the first part of her story. I'm going to go back to share my screen again. You know, the first part, the first thing, she could start her story with getting lost and crying and calling her dad. And she could end the story with the salmon. She could do that because it's not the same as driving to ARC, right? There's lots of different ways to get there. But the thing that's most important to understand and think about is, what do you, instead of thinking, I want to arrive at ARC on time, you're thinking when you're writing, I want the reader to understand something. I want the reader to have some understanding of the theme, of the main idea. That's why last week, and you're going to hear me say this over and over when we talk about narrative, your theme is like your thesis, right? I cannot tell you how many times I've read students' first draft, and it's a lovely narrative. Last semester, I had a student who wrote a beautiful narrative, beginning, middle, and end, with wonderful details about their wedding day. And I felt like a bad person. Now I'm going to take my sharing again. Oops, excuse me. I felt like a bad person because I had to tell her, like, this is great writing, but there was no, it didn't matter. Like, there was no theme. And I tried to tell her, like, how do you want the reader to feel when you read? And she was like, I don't know. And that's the problem, right? So like, your job as the writer, Henry, is not to make sure that you give me a narrative sentence and then a descriptive sentence and then a theme sentence and then 2 narrative sentences and then 3 descriptive sentences. So if me saying structure is giving you the wrong idea there, I apologize. But because I want you to, instead of thinking about driving directions to ARC, I want you to think about, you are going to tell the reader where they're going in this metaphor, right? You, instead of saying there's only one place to go, ARC, you're going to tell them because you choose the theme, right? The theme for this story, I think, absolutely is about home and family. Right now, we could talk about those deeper themes, the symbols that represent that, the maps, the salmon, how Jamila feels about family and home. But I think like that's what she wants you to feel. She doesn't want you to think about, oh, Portland sounds like a beautiful place. I want to visit Portland. You might feel that way, right? Like you might go down that side street. But that's different than in a research essay, you are giving driving directions, right? You are making an argument in a thesis statement. In this type of writing, your thesis statement is the theme. Your thesis statement is the deeper meaning of the story. And then you can use these different elements of narrative, descriptive, and thematic writing to come together to give the reader the experience that you want them to have. Oh my God, I just talked for so long. Henry, did any of that make sense?
Thank you, Professor. I appreciate every word what you explained to us. You know,
I hope you know, and Draga too, if I ever disagree with you guys, or when you disagree with me, I as a teacher, I always get excited because I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna learn something, right? Like when really engaged, thoughtful, smart students ask me questions and I'm like, I'm not sure I disagree. I think it just, for me, means I need to explain something better or something like that. So I hope, yeah, I'm never saying you're wrong, Henry. I'm just sort of thinking that's so interesting. I mean, and again, maybe it's the word structure, Henry. Maybe I should say elements or something. You know, maybe that would be more helpful for some students.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Just about agree and disagree.
Yeah.
My aunt always say me, if you want to know something more from someone, you just disagree with him, you know.
I agree. I when I was in grad school, well, one of the times that I was in grad school, and then I'll share my screen again. I want to make sure I show you guys the annotated version here. But a story. When I was in grad school, two really good friends. I was in a group. I was working in a group. You know, 3 people, and it was me. And then I was watching these 2 other women, and they were talking to each other, and they started to disagree. And I remember I was in the room with them, and I was like, "Ooh!" And my friend Carrie, she turned to me and she goes, "Why are you excited?" And I said, "Oh, well, 2 really smart people that I respect disagree. So just from listening to you, I'm going to learn something." You know, so anyway, it sounds like I agree with your aunt. You know what I mean? I think so too. I think so too. Okay, let me share my screen because I know we've got, what, 10 minutes or maybe less here. I want to make sure that I show you those sections that we just read, some more examples as we start to think about these aspects that you might put into different structure, or if you are comfortable calling them structure of narrative writing, I still think they're part of it. But here on the pages that I just read, right, I'm saying home is an example of a key word that keeps coming up and is part of the theme. I think that we get some, as you can see, lots and lots of narrative here. Places and dates, right? Parents ended up in Oregon. Middle school, places and dates. Draga's example about the apartments, right? And then a few descriptive details. We loved many things about the city, especially its spring days, warm and wet, right? Again, warm and wet. I can feel what this is like, right? That great sentence Draga gave us about lips and knuckles bleeding, painful. And then the Sadaf gave us that example in the chat about the Somali government in '91. Places, right? Canada, Edmonton. We get a description. Well, again, we get information about her father, and he used to be a student, and he's a cab driver now, right? So here's sort of my very fast example of these 3 aspects, these 3 elements of narrative writing here. And one more page to show you, and you can take a look at this on your own time. I didn't give you the full annotated version because what I want you to do is look at my example and then go back and read it and see, can you start to notice these things? Can you see how they come together, right? So as, oh, that was the synonym I was thinking of, Draga, atlas, right? Atlas, map, topography. We get all, there it is, topography. We get all these synonyms or similar words for map. So again, theme clues, theme clues, theme clues, theme clues. Yes. Oh, the last thing I wanted to say about, as you go through as you keep reading in the book, another easy way, and again, I'm getting you ready to write, right? Another easy way to get descriptive details into your own writing is quotes, right? So here they're talking about unfortunately, tragically, her sister dies, right? If you read the story. And we get this detail about her and her mom. So the day after her funeral, her sister's funeral, my mother and I sat on the couch holding hands. And then we get a quote, right? Dialogue. This was never supposed to be home, she said through her tears. But Ayan is here. How can we ever leave? We buried my sister and we put down roots, right? A nice example of a conversation, quotes. Again, you can literally hear what was said, what her mom and what she said. And then immediately we say, okay, she said this, I said this, and then we get narrative. We buried her and we put down roots. That's telling the reader we stayed, right? After that, we didn't leave, we stayed. And then again, I think another excellent example, painful, but of descriptive detail, grief transforms the topography. On a map, I can point to the intersection where the car accident took my sister's life, the street where the funeral home is located, the cemetery where she's buried, but a map doesn't show details, painful details, the blood pooling on the pavement, the glass shattered at the edge of the road, the skid marks, the acrid smell, acrid means like bitter, the bitter acrid smell of burning rubber, right? Hopefully, clear examples of descriptions, 5 senses. What did it look like? What did it smell like in this example, right? And I think we get all of them, right? Oh, I thought we heard the skid marks, the glass. I thought she talked about the sound. I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second. Okay, so I know again a quick sort of review of narrative, detail writing, and thematic writing, and we'll get more examples of this for the next few weeks here. But again, with just 5 minutes left, do these concepts make sense? What I'm asking you to be aware of, because what I think, what do I want to say? What I hope, what I hope is as you keep reading, you start to notice, ooh, that's a nice description. Oh, I think this might be the theme of this story, right? That's why I'm taking this time to go this slow. So I want to make sure if you've got an amazing, great question like Didya about, well, what's the difference between the narrative and any last questions about that here before I set you free to keep reading, because that's what we're doing this week. But as you read, again, I want you to practice being aware of these structures, these elements of narrative writing. Anybody? Oh my God, I talked so much tonight. Are you guys still awake?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to show you real quick on the PowerPoint. Do we have to note them down as we read? Asha is saying, do we have to note them down as we read? No, I'm not going to give you a test like that, Asha. I'm not a monster. I won't do that to you. But again, we did talk about reading strategies, right? If annotating them while you read will help you practice this or be aware of it, absolutely, right? If you bought the book and it's your book to keep, for sure, right? Take a note, highlight, use my system, use this example here. Absolutely, Asha. But I'm never gonna give you a quiz, you know, for points and say, for 5 points, is this theme writing or narrative? No, I'm not, I won't do that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, using reading strategies, including annotation, is a very good idea, very good idea. Anybody else? We got 2 minutes, so actually I should just show you the last slide and then let you get out of here. Keep reading is the short version of this, right? Keep going. Finish lessons 1 through 11. And like I said to Draga, to anybody, if you want more practice with this, please email me, but I don't want to give people so much work that they get behind. So finish those lessons that are in Canvas and just keep going. Right? Next week, we're going to finish with this story and do another deep dive. Deep dive is like a detailed analysis of one of the stories in this section. Again, I'll tell you right now, just in case you're like, Jeff, I don't have time to read all this. We're going to talk next week about the dress. The dress starts on page 139, okay? So next week we'll get to talk with much more details about The Dress by Soraya Membreno on page 139. But we will finish talking about a map of lost things. Okay, to respect your time of you wonderful people, I am going to stop the recording, but if you do have questions, you know me, I'm happy to stay. So otherwise I'll see you later.